The rain came down soft and steady that evening, the kind of rain that made the world feel small and quiet, just the two of us inside our little apartment with steam fogging the windows and the smell of old books and fresh coffee mixing in the air. She sat across from me at our wooden table, her hands wrapped around a mug she had not touched in 20 minutes. Her eyes kept drifting to the window, then back to me, then away again, like she was gathering words from some far place. I knew something was coming. I had felt it for weeks, maybe months, a quiet pulling like a tide moving away from shore. She had been different lately, not cold, not distant, but full of a restless energy that made her pace the rooms at night, sketch in notebooks until dawn, pack and unpack the same small suitcase 3 times in one afternoon. She would look at me with such tenderness it hurt, then look away as if I were a beautiful thing she could no longer hold. "Tell me," I said, my voice softer than I intended. She took a slow breath, her shoulders rising then falling like she was practicing how to let go of something heavy. "I got an offer," she began, then stopped, her fingers tracing the handle of the mug. "I got an offer to go to Barcelona for a year, a studio space, a small stipend enough to live simply. They saw my work online, the mural I did near the train station, the one with the birds and the broken clock." I felt my chest tighten, but I kept my face still. I nodded slowly. "Go on." "It is not just the space," she said, "it is the light there, the way the sun hits the buildings in the afternoon. It is everything I have been trying to paint but could not find here." She looked at me, then really looked at me, her eyes full of something between hope and sorrow. "I need to go," she whispered. "I need to see what I can become when no one is watching, when I am not who you see me as every day." The words landed softly, but they cut deep, not because they were cruel but because they were true. I had loved her with everything in me. I had cheered her art, hung her paintings in every room, cooked meals when she forgot to eat, stayed up talking through her doubts, held her when galleries said no. I had built a home around her, a safe, warm place where she would never have to face the wind alone. And in doing so I had built walls she could not see until now. "You think I am holding you back?" I said, not a question but a realization settling in my bones. "No," she said quickly, too quickly, then softer. "No, you have never held me back, you have held me up always. But love like that, it can become a weight when someone needs to learn how to stand alone." She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine, not touching. "I am not the person I was when we met, and I will not be the person I am now when I return. If I return, that is the risk." I looked at her, at the woman I had loved for 3 years, the artist, the dreamer, the one who cried at sunsets and laughed with her whole body. I saw the fear in her eyes, not fear of leaving but fear of hurting me, and I knew in that moment that my love for her was bigger than my need to keep her. So I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I smiled, a real smile, not a brave one, not a broken one, but one that came from deep understanding. "Go," I said. Just like that. Her eyes widened. She had expected arguments, tears, bargaining, the usual dance of two people trying to save something that needed to end differently. "I mean it," I continued, my voice steady though my hands wanted to shake. "Go paint under that Spanish sun, get lost in streets that do not know your name, make work that scares you, become whoever is waiting for you there." Tears filled her eyes, then spilled over, silent and slow. She did not wipe them away. "What about us?" she asked, the smallest voice. I reached out then and took her hand, my thumb brushing her knuckles the way I always had, a gesture of comfort, not control. "Us does not end today," I said. "Us becomes something else, something that does not need a shared address to be real. If you grow there and I grow here and our paths cross again, that will be because we chose each other, not because we were afraid to be apart." She cried, then really cried, her body shaking with the relief of a decision made, not forced but welcomed. I held her as the rain continued its gentle rhythm against the glass. I memorized the feel of her, the scent of her hair, the weight of her head on my shoulder, knowing these things would have to last a long time. She left 3 days later, not with drama, not with slammed doors, but with a quiet morning packing finished, a taxi waiting downstairs. We stood in the hallway, the space between our apartment and the elevator feeling infinite. "This is not goodbye," I said. She nodded, her bag slung over one shoulder, her portfolio case in the other. "I know." She kissed me then, not a desperate kiss, not a promise, but a thank you, a blessing, a seal on a sacred agreement between two souls who loved each other enough to release the rope. The elevator doors closed. I stood there long after the sound of the car descending faded. The apartment felt different immediately, not empty but waiting. It held the ghost of her energy, the echo of her footsteps, the imprint of her presence on every surface. I walked through the rooms touching things she had touched, the back of her favorite chair, the edge of the kitchen counter where she leaned while drinking tea, the windowsill where she kept a single thriving succulent. I made coffee for one. I sat at the table alone. And I let the silence in. It was not a comfortable silence at first, it was heavy, thick with absence. I fought the urge to text her, to call, to ask if she had landed safely, if she was okay, if she missed me. I put my phone in a drawer and left it there for 12 hours, a full half day of not knowing anything about her whereabouts, her safety, her heart. It was the first true act of faith I had ever practiced. That night I dreamed of her not as she was but as she might become, standing on a rooftop in a foreign city, paint smeared on her arms, her hair longer, her stance sure, her eyes alight with a fire I had never seen but somehow recognized as mine, to witness not to possess. I woke before dawn, the apartment still dark, the city still sleeping. For the first time in years I had no one to consider but myself, no breakfast to make for two, no plans to coordinate, no heart to protect but my own. It felt terrifying. It felt like freedom. I walked to the window and looked out at the sleeping streets, the same streets we had walked together 1,000 times, but now they belonged to me alone, to discover anew. I did not know then how long the year would feel, how many nights I would ache for the sound of her breathing beside me, how many times I would see something beautiful and have to swallow the instinct to point it out to her. I did not know that letting go would feel less like loss and more like planting a seed deep in dark earth, trusting it would find its way to the light without my hands guiding it. All I knew in that quiet morning was this: I had loved her enough to release my hold. And in doing so I had set us both free. The sun rose over the buildings, painting the sky in colors she would have wanted to capture on canvas, colors I would learn to see again on my own. I took a deep breath. And began the long work of growing into the man who could love without holding tight. The first day of the year without her had begun. And somewhere across an ocean she was stepping into a new studio, her hands trembling not with fear but with possibility. The first day of her becoming had also begun. We were apart. But we were both moving forward. And for now that was enough. The plane landed in Barcelona under a sky the color of faded denim. She stepped onto foreign soil with one suitcase, a portfolio of paintings, and a heart so full of fear it felt like courage. She did not know where to go first, so she stood still, letting the noise of the city wash over her, Spanish words tumbling together like stones in a river, the smell of diesel and baking bread and salt air from the distant sea. Everything was too much and not enough all at once. Her studio was not what she had imagined, not a sunlit loft with white walls and tall windows, but a small room on the third floor of a building with peeling yellow paint. The ceiling sloped in one corner, the single window looked out onto a narrow alley where laundry hung between buildings like colorful flags. The floor was cold tile, the only furniture a narrow bed, a wooden chair and a table someone had left behind. She set her suitcase down in the center of the room and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressing in heavier than she expected. For 3 weeks she barely painted. She walked the streets instead, memorizing the way light fell on cobblestones in late afternoon, how shadows stretched long and blue across plazas, how old men play chess under plane trees, their hands moving with quiet certainty. She sat in cafes ordering coffee. She did not really want just to have a place to rest her tired feet. She sketched in a small notebook quick lines capturing a woman's hands arranging fruit at a market, the curve of a bridge over dark water, the way pigeons scattered like gray leaves in the wind. But these were just exercises, not real paintings, not the work she had come here to make. The money ran low, faster than expected. The stipend was smaller than promised, the cost of living higher. She found work washing dishes in a small tapas bar near the Mercado, her hands red and raw from hot water and harsh soap. She worked evenings until her back ached and her feet throbbed. She returned to her room after midnight, too tired to do anything but collapse onto the bed, still in her clothes, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a bird with broken wings. One night after her shift she sat on the floor of her room surrounded by blank canvases she had bought on credit. She dipped a brush in blue paint and made one stroke then another, then stopped, her hand shaking not from fatigue but from something deeper, a voice inside whispering, "You do not belong here, you are pretending to be an artist, you are just a person who ran away from love." She cried then, not the gentle tears of the cafe goodbye but ugly wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep. She cried for the warmth of a shared bed, for the comfort of a familiar voice, for the safety of being known. She cried until there were no tears left, only a hollow quiet, and in that quiet something shifted. She stood up, wiped her face with the back of her paint-stained wrist and mixed a new color, not the safe blues she always used but a bold burnt orange, the color of sunset on terracotta, the color of courage. She painted through the night, not thinking, not planning, just moving her body with the brush until the canvas held something raw and true, a figure reaching upward surrounded by fragments of memory, a window, a coffee cup, a hand letting go. She did not know what it meant, she only knew it was honest. Morning came gray and soft. She slept for 3 hours then returned to the tapas bar for her shift, her body tired but her mind clear for the first time since arriving. Months passed in a rhythm of work and paint. She learned to stretch her euros buying day-old bread and ripe tomatoes, eating simply so she could afford good brushes. She made friends slowly, not the easy friendships of shared history but the careful bonds of people finding common ground, a Portuguese sculptor who shared his wine, a Moroccan poet who read her words in a language she did not understand but felt in her bones, an elderly Catalan woman who ran a flower stall and sometimes pressed a single bloom into her hand with a nod that said, "I see you." She painted on everything, not just canvases but scraps of wood, discarded cardboard, the walls of her room where the landlord would not see. She painted the city not as it looked but as it felt, the weight of history in ancient stones, the joy in children chasing soccer balls through narrow streets, the loneliness of tourists taking pictures of things they would never truly see. She painted her own loneliness too, not as emptiness but as space, a necessary hollow where new things could grow. Winter came cold and damp. She wore all her sweaters at once, huddled under blankets while painting, her breath visible in the air. She thought often of the other person back home, wondered if he was warm, if he had found comfort in the silence she had left behind. She did not call, she did not text, she honored the space they had agreed upon, but sometimes late at night she would write letters she never sent, filling notebooks with words about light and color and growth. She would close the books and slide them under her bed, evidence of a conversation happening only in her heart. Spring arrived with a suddenness that startled her. One day the alley outside her window was gray and damp, the next it was alive with the scent of blooming jasmine, a warmth in the air that felt like forgiveness. She took her paints outside for the first time, setting up on a low wall in a quiet plaza. An old man sweeping nearby watched her for a long time, then nodded and continued his work, a small permission, a quiet blessing. She painted the plaza, not the buildings or the fountain but the space between things, the way light pooled in certain spots, the invisible threads connecting strangers passing through the same square at the same moment. She painted until her back ached and the sun began to set. When she finally stepped back, an elderly woman stood watching, tears in her eyes. The woman did not speak English, the painter did not speak Catalan, but the woman pointed to the painting, then to her own heart, and nodded slowly before walking away. That moment mattered more than any gallery acceptance ever could. By month 8 something had changed in her work. The hesitation was gone, the second guessing, the fear of not being good enough had burned away through sheer repetition, through showing up day after day even when nothing came, even when everything felt wrong. She had built a practice, not a performance. She painted because she needed to, not because she hoped someone would see. She began painting murals in forgotten corners of the city with permission from shop owners or building managers, small works tucked into alleyways, a splash of color on a blank wall, a gift to whoever might pass by. One afternoon while painting a large piece in El Raval, a neighborhood of narrow streets and vibrant life, a man stopped and watched for nearly an hour. He wore a simple dark jacket, his hands folded behind his back. When she finally stepped down from her ladder to mix more paint, he approached. "Your work," he said in careful English, "has a voice." She thanked him, expecting him to continue on his way. He did not leave. Instead he introduced himself, the owner of a small gallery nearby. He had been watching her for weeks. He said he saw how people stopped to look, how children pointed, how the paintings seemed to breathe with the neighborhood, not imposed upon it but grown from it. He offered her a show, not a big exhibition, not fame, but a real chance. 4 walls in his space, 6 paintings, a quiet opening with wine and conversation. She said yes, not with excitement but with calm certainty. This was not the goal she had imagined when leaving home, but it was the right next step. The night before the show she sat on her floor surrounded by the paintings she had chosen, each one a chapter of her year: the blue period of loneliness, the orange awakening, the gray winter reflections, the golden spring discoveries. She thought of the person who had let her go, not with resentment but with gratitude. His love had been a shelter she needed until she was strong enough to stand in the rain. She packed her brushes carefully, wrapped each canvas in clean cloth and carried them through the sleeping streets toward the gallery, the morning light just beginning to touch the rooftops. She was not the same person who had stepped off the plane a year ago, scared and uncertain. She had grown roots in this foreign soil and they were strong enough now to hold her weight. She had not found herself in Barcelona, she had built herself brush stroke by brush stroke in the quiet hours between dishwashing shifts and sleep. She had learned that growth is not a destination but a practice, a daily choice to show up and make something even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. The gallery door opened before her, the space empty and waiting. She stepped inside and began to hang her work, each painting a testament to the year of becoming, each color a memory of struggle and grace. She was ready now, not for an ending but for whatever came next. The first morning alone felt endless. He woke to an empty side of the bed, the sheets smooth and cold where she had slept just 2 nights before. He lay still for a long time, listening to the apartment breathe without her, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the creak of floorboards settling. These sounds had always been there but now they stood out sharp and lonely. He made coffee for one, the ritual feeling hollow without her, leaning against the counter waiting for her cup. He sat at their table and stared at the steam rising from the mug he had bought her last birthday, blue ceramic with a small chip on the rim. She had loved that chip, said it gave the cup character. He drank the coffee black, though he usually took milk. He had forgotten to buy more and the thought of going to the store felt like climbing a mountain. The days blurred together, at first each one a copy of the last. He went to work, came home, made simple meals, ate in front of the television, not really watching, just needing noise to fill the silence. He folded her clothes carefully and placed them in a wooden chest at the foot of the bed, not because he wanted to erase her but because seeing her sweater draped over the chair hurt in a way he could not explain. 3 weeks in he found himself standing in the doorway of the spare room, a space they had talked about turning into her studio someday, paintbrushes still in their cases, canvases stacked against the wall, waiting for hands that would not return for many months. He closed the door gently and walked away. But something shifted on a Tuesday in late October. Rain tapped against the windows, the same rhythm as the day she left. He was sorting through a box of old books his grandfather had left him when he found it, a small leather-bound journal filled with careful handwriting, not his grandfather's but his great-grandmother's. He had never seen it before, pages filled with observations about weather, plants, neighbors, the slow turning of seasons. She wrote about loneliness, not as an enemy but as a companion. A space where she learned to hear her own thoughts clearly for the first time. He read until his neck ached, until the light faded from the room, until his stomach reminded him he had not eaten. The next morning he did something small. He bought a plant, a simple green thing with broad leaves. The shopkeeper said it needed indirect light and weekly watering. He placed it on the windowsill where she used to keep her succulent. He watered it carefully that evening. The following week he began restoring the old bookstore he had inherited but never opened. The space sat dusty and forgotten on a quiet street just 10 minutes from his apartment. He had been putting off the work for years, telling himself he was too busy, too tired, too unsure what to do with it, but now the hours stretched before him, empty and waiting. He started with the floors, sanding away decades of grime and scuff marks, his muscles burning with effort, the dust coating his arms and face. He worked until his hands were raw, until sweat dripped down his back, until he collapsed onto a paint can at sunset, too tired to think, too tired to miss her, too tired for anything but the simple satisfaction of work completed. He returned the next day and the next. Slowly the space transformed, walls repainted, shelves built by hand from reclaimed wood. He organized sections not by the standard system but by feeling. Books that felt like morning light went together. Stories that carried the weight of winter found their own corner. He spent hours deciding where each volume belonged, touching the spines, running his fingers over titles, imagining the hands that had held these pages before him. One afternoon an elderly woman paused at the window watching him arrange a display of poetry books. She did not come in that day, but the next she returned with 2 cups of tea in paper sleeves. She handed him one through the open door. "You are bringing this place back to life," she said, her voice soft with age. He thanked her and learned her name, Mrs. Gable. She lived in the apartment above the vacant storefront next door. A widow for 12 years, she began stopping by most afternoons, sometimes with baked goods, sometimes with only her presence. She would sit in a newly recovered armchair and watch him work, occasionally offering quiet observations about which books belonged together, which covers needed mending, which stories deserved better homes. One Thursday, as he struggled to fix a stubborn shelf, she said something that stayed with him. "Love is not about holding tight, it is about giving roots room to spread. I watched my husband understand this too late. We spent 40 years gripping each other so hard we forgot how to grow. He died still holding on, and I spent the first year of widowhood learning how to breathe without his weight on my heart." He looked at her, then really looked at the lines around her eyes, the calm in her posture, the peace that seemed to radiate from her stillness. "How did you learn?" she asked, not unkindly. "How did you let her go?" He thought before answering, not the quick reflexive "I wanted her to be happy," but the deeper truth. "I realized my love had become a cage," he said. "Even a beautiful cage is still a cage." Mrs. Gable nodded slowly as if he had passed some quiet test. "You did not lose her," she said, "you gave her sky." Months passed in this rhythm: work at the bookstore, mornings, afternoons with Mrs. Gable, evenings alone but not always lonely. He learned to cook proper meals, not just fuel but food that pleased the senses. He planted herbs in small pots on his fire escape, watching them grow toward the sun. He began reading again, not scrolling through screens but turning actual pages, losing himself in stories that had nothing to do with his own. He did not check her social media, not once. He made a promise to himself and to her that the space between them would remain sacred, unviolated by digital peeks into her new life. There were moments of weakness, of course, nights when his thumb hovered over the search bar, heart pounding with want, but each time he closed the browser and did something else: washed a dish, took a walk, called Mrs. Gable to ask about her day. He grew in the quiet ways that are hard to see from the outside. His shoulders straightened, not from pride but from carrying weight he had chosen to bear. His hands grew calloused from honest work. His mind learned to sit with discomfort without immediately seeking distraction. He discovered he liked his own company, something he had never known before. Winter came sharp and cold. He kept the bookstore warm with a small heater, spending hours arranging holiday displays, not the commercial kind but simple groupings: books about snow, books about coming home, books about quiet joy. Neighbors began stopping in, not to buy but to browse, to escape the cold, to share a few minutes of human connection. He learned their names, their stories, the rhythms of their lives. One evening in January, deep in the heart of winter, he found himself laughing genuinely with Mrs. Gable over a story about her cat's latest mischief. The sound surprised him, his own laughter. He had not heard it in so long it felt foreign yet familiar, like a song from childhood suddenly remembered. He realized in that moment he was no longer waiting for the year to end. He was living inside it, fully present in each day, not counting down but building up, creating a life that could stand on its own whether she returned or not. This realization did not feel like betrayal, it felt like maturity, the understanding that love does not require dependency to be real. Spring arrived with cherry blossoms dotting the street outside the bookstore, now nearly ready to open its doors to the public. He had painted the exterior a soft sage green, repaired every shelf, organized every section. His hands knew the weight of each book, the story behind many of them. Mrs. Gable had helped him design a small reading nook in the corner with comfortable chairs and a lamp that cast warm light, perfect for getting lost in pages. The night before the planned opening, he sat alone in the quiet space, surrounded by thousands of stories, each one a life, a journey, a heart laid bare on paper. He thought of her in Barcelona, wherever she was, whatever she was creating. He hoped she had found her light, he hoped she had grown, he hoped she was happy. And for the first time he realized he truly meant it, not as a sacrifice, not as a painful wish, but as a genuine hope for someone he loved. He had not spent the year pining, he had spent it becoming. The man who had released his hold on that rainy day was still there, but he was stronger now, softer in some places, harder in others, more himself than he had ever been. He turned off the lights and locked the door. The street quiet under a sky full of stars. He walked home, hands in his pockets, breathing the cool spring air, feeling not the absence of her but the presence of his own life blooming quietly in the space she had left behind. The year was not yet complete, but he was no longer the same person who had watched her step into a taxi. He had learned to stand alone. And in doing so had discovered he was never really alone at all. The year had turned its final page. Spring settled over the city with a gentle warmth that felt like forgiveness. Cherry blossoms drifted down onto sidewalks like pink snow. The bookstore stood ready, its windows clean, its shelves full, its door unlocked for the first time to welcome strangers. Mrs. Gable had insisted he take the evening off, rest before the official opening tomorrow. She had shooed him away with a wave of her wrinkled hand, and a container of lemon cake tucked under his arm. He wandered without direction, his feet carrying him toward the river where they had often walked together, watching the water move steadily toward the sea. The sun hung low in the sky, painting everything gold and amber, the kind of light she would have tried to capture on canvas. He thought of her then, not with the sharp ache of early months, but with a quiet warmth like remembering a good dream. A festival had taken over the streets. Art Walk, the banners read, local creators displaying work in shop windows and pop-up galleries. Musicians played on street corners, children chased bubbles through the crowd. He moved slowly through it, all hands in pockets, observing the way people gathered around beauty, the way strangers smiled at each other when sharing space before a painting or sculpture. He did not expect to see her. But there on the window of a small gallery tucked between a bakery and a bookstore hung a painting that stopped his breath. It was them, not their faces but their essence, two figures at a cafe table, rain streaking the glass between inside and outside, one figure seated, one standing, the seated figure reaching not to pull the other back but to release the standing figure, stepping into rain that transformed halfway into wings, feathers of blue and gold catching light that did not exist in the real world. The colors were familiar, her colors, but deeper, richer, layered with a confidence he had not seen before. He stood frozen, people flowing around him like water around a stone, his heart beating a rhythm he had forgotten was possible. The plaque beneath the painting read simply, "The Letting Go." And below that, smaller, almost hidden for those who looked closely, "For the love that knew when to loosen its grip." He turned slowly as if moving through deep water. And there she was, standing 10 feet away, paint smudged on her apron, sleeves rolled to her elbows, hair shorter than he remembered, sun-touched at the ends, her eyes older, wiser, holding a quiet strength that had not been there before. She did not rush forward, she did not cry, she simply stood watching him, watching her, watching the painting that held their story. "You came," she said, her voice softer than he remembered but steady. He could not speak at first, the words caught somewhere between his heart and his throat. He nodded instead, a small movement that held everything. The gallery owner, a man with kind eyes and salt and pepper hair, approached, sensing the moment between them. "This is the artist," he said to a passing couple, then to her, "This is the one the painting is for." She did not correct him, she only kept her gaze on the person standing before her, the one who had let her go. They stepped away from the crowd, finding a quieter space near the riverbank where the noise softened to a hum. The water moved dark and steady beneath them, reflecting the evening sky. "You look well," he said finally, the words simple but carrying the weight of 12 months. "So do you," she replied, and he knew she meant it, not just his appearance but something deeper, the way he stood, the calm in his shoulders, the absence of the tension he used to carry. "The gallery show went well," she said. "I did not expect it to matter so much, but it did, having walls to hang real work on, not just alleyways." He told her about the bookstore, the sanding, the organizing, Mrs. Gable and her wisdom about gardens and roots. They spoke of small things, the kind of details that fill ordinary days, what they ate for breakfast, which season they preferred, which books had moved them recently. They did not speak of loneliness or missing each other, not yet, that would come later. This was reconnaissance, gentle, careful mapping of who they had become in the space between. The sun dipped lower, painting the river in shades of orange and purple. I thought I needed to leave to find myself, she said, her voice quiet but clear. I packed my bags believing I would discover some hidden version of me waiting in a foreign city, but that is not what happened. He listened, watching the way her hands moved when she spoke, more expressive now, less hesitant. I did not find myself, she continued. I built myself every day, washing dishes with sore hands, painting when I wanted to quit, eating bread so dry I could barely swallow it because I needed the money for good brushes. I built myself stroke by stroke in the cold of that room with the sloping ceiling. I built myself, and it was hard and lonely, and sometimes I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. But you kept going, he said. I kept going because you let me. She turned to face him fully, her eyes holding his without flinching. Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered your hands letting go of mine, not because you stopped loving me but because you loved me enough to trust me to grow. That memory became my strength when nothing else was. He felt something open in his chest, a space he had not known was closed. I thought about you every day, he admitted, not in a sad way but in a wondering way. I would see light on a building and think she would paint that. I would meet someone interesting and think she would like this person. I carried you with me, not as a weight but as a companion. They walked slowly along the river path, the city lights beginning to flicker on around them. I did not look at your pictures online, she said. I did not read your posts. I honored the space we made, even when it hurt, even when I wanted so badly to know if you were okay. I did the same, he said. We both kept our promise. A silence settled between them, comfortable, not heavy, the kind of quiet that exists between people who understand each other without words. The painting, she said after a while, it is not about goodbye, it is about gratitude. I know, he said. I felt it when I saw it. You painted the moment I understood what love really means. They reached a small bridge crossing a narrow part of the river. Halfway across, she stopped, leaning against the railing, looking down at the water. I am not the same person who left that rainy day, she said. I know. And you are not the same person who stayed. No, she turned to him, then really looked at him, taking in the changes, the new lines around his eyes, the steadiness in his posture, the calm that radiated from him like warmth from sun-warmed stone. Do you think, she asked carefully, two people can grow in different places and still find their way back to each other, not out of habit or fear but because they choose to? He did not answer with words. Instead, he reached for her hand, slowly giving her time to pull away. She did not. She let his fingers close around hers, the touch familiar yet new, like meeting an old friend who has traveled far and returned with stories in their eyes. Their hands fit together, not as they had before, tight and certain, but with space enough to breathe, room enough to move, yet connected by a thread stronger than before because it had been tested and chosen again. I think, he said finally, looking down at their joined hands, I think two people can grow apart and grow toward each other at the same time if they are growing honestly. She smiled, then a real smile that reached her eyes, the smile he had missed more than he could say. The gallery owner found them there on the bridge as dusk deepened into night. He approached hesitantly, holding two small cups of wine. The opening is going well, he said. Many people connected with your work. He handed them each a cup, then nodded respectfully and walked away. They stood sipping the wine, watching the city lights multiply on the water surface. I have a studio here now, she said, a small one above a print shop. The owner saw my work, liked it, offered me space for almost nothing. I am staying. He did not ask if she was staying for him. He knew better now. Love was not about reasons, it was about choices. I am glad, he said simply. The year is over, she said. Yes. What happens now? Now, he said, we take a walk, we talk, we see where the night leads us. We do not rush, we do not assume, we simply be together and discover who we are to each other today, not who we were a year ago. She nodded, her head resting gently against his shoulder, a gesture so natural it felt like coming home, but a new home, one they would build together with fresh hands and open hearts. They finished their wine and continued walking, following the river as it curved through the sleeping city, their hands still joined, not gripping, not clinging, but holding with a lightness that spoke of trust, of respect, of a love that had learned to breathe on its own and found its way back, not because it had to but because it wanted to. The night stretched before them full of possibility, not promise, not guarantee, but the quiet beautiful chance to begin again, with eyes wide open, hearts scarred but stronger, and hands that knew when to hold tight and when to let go. And for the first time in a year they walked into the future, not alone but together, choosing each step as they took it.